No secrets.
No secrets. Very good. Very good. Well, then maybe we can start without further ado, because then those people who will join later and they will be able to see some of this in the recording, and this way we have a bit more time to follow this and discuss this more uh, in this virtual setup. I'm really happy that Alexander, who has a research group, his research group in ITMO University in St. Petersburg, agreed to give a seminar that is really highly relevant topic for these specific sessions of the learning graph based kind of and data geometries that we discussed in the previous sessions. So thanks a lot, Alexander, for your time, for coming, and yeah, floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for invitation. It is always good to make a good speech. Okay. So I just try to make it really simple to um, everyone could follow and so on and so forth. So uh, don't be don't be eluded. Don't be uh, don't be how to say uh, the the first part is really easy, but the last parts are really current contemporary science. So we just make an easy start and talk about very advanced things later. So stay tuned. Uh, in my opinion, every every talk on Ricci curvature, on manifold, on distances, and so on and so forth should begin with something really easy. So you just have to be on same page. So I begin with cats and dogs. If we train an AI model and machine learning model, you usually use, of course, convolutional neural network. You put your images as mm, matrices into model and obtain, for example, classification between cats and dogs. But if we think on images as points in Euclidean geometry, we could find out that some points, for example, green dog, is really far away from usual dogs from one point of view. But from another point of view, it is still dog. And the system, the machine learning model, should be able to work with green dogs too, because sometimes the dog gets dirty or whatsoever. But this leads that space of dogs and space of cats is not quite Euclidean. So we should be able to say that dogs are close in some another metric. And this stuff is like our brain works. We don't measure dogs in Euclidean space. We have some notion like dog posture, dog fluffiness, uh, dog color, dog background, or and something like this. And we can distinguish um, from cat cat from dog, well, just using very specific coordinates like I don't know, like ear shape. So we think in our brain in another coordinates, and in our brain all dogs are close, but the metric in which dogs are close is not quite Euclidean. So it's just like a starter that we think, and we should make models not using the standard Euclidean metric. And that's really the point when you understand that the distance in machine learning um, is very of essence. So let's move to the another very mathematical concept, and that means that the brain, our usual common sense, is things in a manifold. So we map all cats, dogs, all objects into very low dimension space. So the number of features that we use to distinguish between cats and dogs are very of little dimension. But in terms of Euclidean points, the picture of dog of high resolution is, for example, 1000 times 1000 matrix times 3 channel. It's very high dimension space, but we don't require all dimensions. And that moves us to the notion that most of the data in machine learning has a manifold structure. So they are in embedded in very low dimension space. But what we are required? We are required to find the structure of the space, and this is very crucial. We don't have readily available tools. We have to think very complicated things to obtain such manifolds. And we spent a lot of time to reach the manifold structure. And that's will be the main point of discussion for my talk, how to make it very easy and in a very native manner from both sides, from AI and mathematics also. So I would like to move to some real world examples. So just not to use toy examples. So you are get some background to start your research. First example is hyperbolic networks. Not so long ago, in year 2022, there were a series of publications in very high impact journals, in very good conferences, that hyperbolic networks sometimes may can give very good results for some tasks, for some problems. Among all, they are very good in recommendation systems and in RexSys. So it reflects that fact that the user preferences are really decay from time. So if you buy one thing, the next thing you buy is really important for you, but the next things like are really decay in importance. Just for example, you buy a laptop. It's a standard example for recommendation systems. Then you maybe need a backpack if you don't have any for your laptop, but all other things such as computer mouse, maybe some stickers to put on laptop are not really of essence. They are not necessary to be purchased by you. So it's like some kind of importance curve. It's really exponential in decrease really fast. But the hyperbolic networks are really hard to handle since you have to change our usual operators such as addition and scalar to vector multiplication such to preserve Euclidean distance. Such to preserve, of course, Lobachevsky or hyperbolic distance. But could we make it really simple? It's really of essence in machine learning to work with more simple things. Of course, we could. The next thing that blows up whole area, whole recommended systems area, that we are able to achieve same results, but we are not using hyperbolic networks. We just use another distance between users and items. So we just shift not the architecture of neural network, not the network by itself, but just the distance. And if we change only distance, staying with standard architectures, we achieve the same quality increase, but we have simple architectures that we are able to work with very easy. We are know how to train them and so on and so forth. So it's first place when you are thinking that the distance is really of essence. It's a really essential thing in machine learning, and that's really so. This one is a very important breakthrough in the recommended system area. Another example of application is around data augmentation. So in machine learning, you would like to have as much data as possible, but usually you don't have so much data example. So you, for example, for pictures, you start to rotate them to make some shifts, contrast change, add noise, and so on and so forth. But in sense of models, the pictures that were obtained from initial one, for example, you add noise to image, the prediction of your network should be really close for those two guys, noised one and clear one, so to say. People are really trying to make this happen, to make this notion of distance, but it's totally not Euclidean. You see that the distance between clear image and noised image are really big in terms of neural network. But it returns us to the idea that the distance should be not Euclidean, and we should be able to recover it, to discover it. And that returns us to methods to recover the manifolds, to recover the manifold structure, to recover the distance. Um, mm, the last point, how you solve this particular problem, you just make the distance graph for which all the connected images, for example, clear one and all noised examples, have the distance 1 between each other, and for all other specimens, you have the distance of plus infinity, so you just don't have an edge. And that also works, surprisingly. But you should know beforehand that you are using augmentations, that you should connect two images. And that's really a lot of handwork, and it's really non-AI, non-machine learning way. How could we make it, how could we alleviate it? How could we make it more simpler, more automated? So this moves us to a bit of history. Those are dimension reduction and in as a pinnacle manifold learning methods. Just a quick reminder, I would need those mathematics. If you don't familiar with it, it's okay. Just a brief recap. Every vector, every and could be decomposed into some operator eigenmodes, and eigenmodes have corresponding eigenvalues. So the main idea here that the larger eigenvalue is, the more, so to say, informative it is. So the more information it contains. So you could retain only few um, few eigenvectors, eigenmodes with large eigenvalues, and still retain a lot of information on your initial decomposed vector. So this idea is crucial for linear dimension reduction. First of is obviously singular value decomposition. It's first thing that every undergraduate in AI in applied mathematics meets. It's singular value decomposition, and I don't want to stop on it. It's just a linear projection. You retain some information using dispersion part, but the main problem is it's linear by its nature. So let's see. Let's see it on an example. Examples are always good. So you have some 3D surface, which is some kind of spiral. But if you use PCA on it, you will see that the structure, the manifold structure of this bit, this guy, is not preserved. So the black points, which are in the beginning, are really close to red points in the middle, which are the end of the surface. So the distance between points, and we know that in manifold we should only use the surface to move from point to point. So we just have to move all over the spiral. But in this way, the distance is disturbed. So you don't preserve the distance, and that is really not good for machine learning. How could we make an way out, still use singular value decomposition or principal component analysis in terms of machine learning? They are goals. So yeah, we just use the notion of locality. So we don't take all points on manifold. We just take some nearest neighbors and make a PCA. So we just go over all neighborhood, make a PCA decomposition, and we get something which is really resembles our spiral, but in 2D. And that's the really good place to start. And also locality is, well, some kind of preserve the topology structure that says that all places are all point vicinities in the manifold are locally Euclidean. The uh, the main thing that we don't know what is point vicinity often in machine learning. So we cannot define what are good points to make a PCA and what are not good points. And that's really crucial, but still we could make this automatic in an automatic manner using Euclidean distance and so on. Before we move further, I will move to the it's actually the middle when we start to discuss really complex things. The manifold, from mathematics point of view, could be really well described by the graph and what the graph should have. Every vertex of the graph is a point in manifold, which agrees well with our common sense. And the edges of graph are essentially the distance between the points. And using this, well, you could say approximation, but in terms of topology, it's not really so. It just map to other space. We just map our manifold to a graph. You could really research all properties of your manifold based on properties of a graph. So it's almost, it's not quite one by one correspondence, but it's really close correspondence between graph and a given manifold. And if you move to move to machine learning, here the points are our usual data points. They are points in feature space, and the edges are just the distance. And we have to just to recover the edges of graph, and that's all we are interested, all we are desire to when we tell that we should be able to extract the topology structure. Okay, how could we at all extract the edges, extract the distances? Well, there are some classical methods. For example, you could use something very simple, which is called isomap. Isomap is also a linear projection, but it's a linear projection not only for points, but for a graph by itself. You just, well, try to make your graph really flat, really low dimension, really low dimension structure. And the main point, main deal in isomap is multi-dimension scaling, which is really simple, transform it's really fast. And you obtain essentially better result. When you have a graph instead of just a points, you could see that your linear projection leads to a really good picture when red points are essentially far away from blue points. So the left points are far away from right points. And that corresponds to our spiral structure, which is roll out onto the 2D plane. And you could do this, but it's obviously not preserve more subtle properties such as curvature and so on and so forth, but it preserves distance, and it's more or less enough for all machine learning application. What we could do else? There are essentially 2 points of views. First one is to try to make more sophisticated things with initial graph. I forgot to mention that the initial graph is still obtained using the Euclidean distances or in feature space. But the manifold learning methods are differs in what happens with initial graph thereafter. And if you make some sophisticated transforms, you could also preserve even curvature of space and all other topological and geometrical characteristics. The question is that the more sophisticated things you are do to graph, the more time consuming it is. But it still the preliminary step when you are trying to get another feature space to fed into your neural network. So it's starting point, and you to make the initial data transform. As an excuse, you should do this only once. So it's just one time uh, one time operation, once on a time operation. So it's a good point. Another point of view is to learn autoencoder that have autoencoder. It's just a neural network architecture that is trained like one by one transform, but in the middle you have some kind of dimensionality reduction. And after you learn your autoencoder, you just split it by half and you make low dimensional embedding from it, the neural network by itself decides what the map to lower dimension is. It's quite not interpretable, but you could use some constraints on low dimension thing, and you could even preserve the geometry. And yes, you could see that there are some elephant or mammoth because it has really long, really long ivories. But yes, you could see that how different methods are performed to map it onto two-dimension space. And you could see, for example, that stochastic neighborhood method TSNE is really bad for your geometry and topology and UMAP also. It does not preserve too many of topological things. But still, you could train autoencoders that will preserve some geometry. And so you could see that it's still the same elephant. Of course, these are two examples, but they are very illustrative to see that not every method has its own purpose. And if we talk on topology, is essentially not only the visualization, it's also on how we preserve all distances in a correct surface way. Yeah, before I move to recent research, to our recent attempts to answer the question, how could we extract the topology in automatic manner, I should return to a simple thing. We are still have some group of machine learning method that is called distance learning method, and we could try to extract some different from Euclidean distance, and we could use it to form a graph and try to say that, okay, this graph will resemble our topology and so on and so forth. And there are the classical methods like Mahanabilis distance or something close to. So, and you could learn the distance. The problem is that such distance, well, it's obviously a step forward from Euclidean distance, but it also is not able to obtain any possible graph. It also had too much restrictions, such as linearity of PCA or single order decomposition. It's too much, has too much restrictions, so it's also not good. If we move to modern methods, on contemporary methods, they are the CMS networks. Well, it also learns something that could measure the similarity between points. But the CMS networks, by its nature, is not symmetric, so it's not the distance in a mathematical sense. So you obtain the graph, which is not symmetric, and it's really hard to handle with. It's really hard to work with, and also they are usually very complex and very time consuming to train, and even they are very time consuming to infer, to find distance between 2 points after the training. And that's why they're good to use, for example, in face recognition systems. If your university or um, uh, your work overall has face recognition systems, it may work on CMS networks. They're good in face recognition and so on, but they are not good as distance learning methods. I will show it a bit later. So yes, now we move to the crucial point. We should move to learn manifold, to manifold learning, and that means that we should learn somehow the very good graph. But we should think on what the very good graph is. And that's a crucial point here. If we know what is good graph, what is good topology for data, then we are answer all questions. But it's not really simple, and I don't have a readily available answer. So I just make some kind of cliffhanger. So you just have some place to think, and we also will think on it. So let's move to the really simple example. Really simple and really good place to start. If you have such a problem, which seems really simple, you have two circles. From mathematics point of view, it is not a big deal. You just define a polar coordinates and you will be able to separate them with circle. Obviously, we have a classification problem that inner circle is of class, for example, 1, and outer circle is of class 0. If you try to draw a line in Cartesian coordinates, you obviously won't be able to separate two class. It's just like 101 of machine learning and 101 of topology. But of course, if you use polar coordinates, then you are able to separate those two things because, well, they are separated just along the radial coordinates. So all points that have radial coordinates less than something or larger than something is class 1 and class 0 vice versa. And yes, it is the case. But we could use the same architecture, but we use simple UMAP projection using only the distances. So when you define the distances between points not in a Euclidean but in a polar way, it's only thing you require to significantly better solve this problem. So all we need to do is to find a good distance graph. And this is really fascinating and really, really not so trivial thing that only thing we need to consider different geometry, different topology is to define a good graph. We could handle the graph, well, fast. We have a lot of things that works with graph. They are very familiar in computer science, very familiar structures in computer science, and so on and so forth. But we should extract, we should distill the notion of a good graph. And this is not so trivial. The first thing that you meet when you are thinking on how to put graph, how to find a way out, how to use a distance in your machine learning pipeline is manifold regularization. Is статья by Belkin. It appears in 2006. You just add some simple term that is essentially applying of Laplace operator into your machine learning architecture. It's really simple to do. It's just mathematical operation. It's just matrix by vector multiplication. So still you have to get the graph. You have to get the distance graph. You won't be able to do something unless you find the distance graph. Of course, we could reformulate this problem, and we could think that we are search the graphs. We are optimize both the model and the graph. This was our first point to think that we could somehow change the distances, remove some edges, and so on and so forth to obtain the better graph and obtain the better results. So basically, what you do here, you are not minimize your main metric for machine learning. For example, your something. Now I say contrary, you increase your precision. So, and you lower the second term, which is scalar product of Laplacian, or that involves Laplacian. And minimizing this fellow is essentially this fellow called Dirichlet energy. It's very well-known quantity in topology. It reflects some properties of a manifold, or of a function on manifold, of a flow on manifold. But it sometimes helps, of course. But yeah, you should make it really simple, because handling with graph is fast, but not so fast as lightning. It still requires a lot of time. So you should start with a good initial guess. So on initial guess, we have to, it's our part of research. We have to think on something really simple. We just start with Euclidean distances. It's a really good point to start. Then we filter out some edges with a kernel. So then we also reduce some excessive edges, and we got a really simple graph that is shown on the right-hand side. And thereafter, we just apply some standard genetic programming algorithm when we add some edges, remove some edges, change the distance on some random increment. It could be positive or negative. And several other additions. And sometimes this simple thing from machine learning point of view helps to find a good graph, helps to find a good geometry. But it's not a panacea. It's not a universal way. There are actually several approaches, and this one works not every time. But still, if you look into 2D projection, you could see that there are some kind of human point of view. So we could, for some problems, recover some human human way of thinking of figures. For example, sometimes you could see that in discovered topology, there are points that represent the numbers that align on certain angle, or you have some continuous transform of certain figures. So like you could really make a continuous transformation like topological flow and so on and so forth. It's a good point, but the bad point, it requires a lot of time for the first place, and at the second place, it requires for us to stop the procedure at a certain moment. So the main rule of thumb here is that we should minimize Dirichlet energy, but we shouldn't minimize it too much, since the zero Dirichlet energy represents an empty graph where our points are not connected. It's very trivial, and it's not good for any application. So we should somehow stop it very early, and we still don't have any ideas on how to be able to stop this to stop these procedures. So we just stop it manually and hope that it works. But also we compare this with CMS networks. CMS networks, well, on small data sets, they are not good because you require much more data to train them, and they are also have the larger energy. So this approach definitely outperforms the CMS network, definitely outperforms some manifold learning methods, but it requires too much manual labor, so it's not so good to work with. Well, another point of view is, and this will be my last topic. I will discuss this very briefly. Is a fascinating thing that is my discovery of the year, that the Ricci flow, which is used for Perelman theorem proof, Perelman-Poincaré theorem proof, it also has a discrete analog. So you could compute Ricci curvature on a graph. So it returns us to the notion that the graph represents properties of initial topology. And the Ricci curvature in discrete setup is essentially reflects that fact that the bridges, that the edges, which are crucial for connectivity of the graph, they have a larger curvature than all other. And the Ricci curvature, discrete Ricci curvature, could be used for example, community detection when you have some separate isos of peoples or whatsoever. So you just remove bridges and you get the communities. To compare our approach with the Ricci curvature, you could see that I show some plots. We measure Ricci curvature distribution over all runs of our algorithm, and we see that in topology, we know that the sign of curvature is really of essence for manifold. You could basically separate all manifolds on manifolds with negative curvature, with manifold of positive curvature, and zero curvature is essentially a plane. I suppose so. So you just see that curvature distribution is not changing too much, but it still converges toward some negative value. And if you perform a Ricci flow, if you reduce the number of, if you try to, well, let's say, make a curvature really constant in your graph, it's called a Ricci flow procedure. And there are several discrete analogies of Ricci flow. You just see that the curvature are also negative. So we are somehow close to notion of good topology, and all we left to think on uh, how to define a good graph. So definitely the good graph is not the zero energy graph. It's graph with some kind of minimal energy, but still some research is required to find out how low could energy be. So yes, just a simple conclusion, just a simple, very very obvious conclusion. Data is a manifold, and we should live with it. And it is essentially nonlinear manifold, and what we are required is to find a distance graph. And the tools to find the distance graph are plenty, but we should use them very careful, since not all tools allow to preserve local geometry, curvature, and so on and so forth. They're not all give a good graph for model training. So, and you just could somehow optimize the graph, but we still don't know, we still don't have any notion what the good graph is, and it's a crucial point. As far as we are able, as we would be able to define what is good graph is, what the quantity we should minimize for a graph, then we are good to go. We are really have a good tool, but we are still require some research in this direction. Just a moment of advertising. We are a huge lab. We don't make research only on manifolds. We will also have a good AutoML tools, Hhvatov. We make an probabilistic modeling tools like Bayesian network training tool BAMT. We do a lot of differential equation research, pins, equation discovery. Recently, we do a lot of research on large language model tools, and we are mostly doing tools for machine learning scientists and users overall. So feel free to check our GitHub. For Russian-speaking users, as a YouTube blogger, I should say subscribe to our channel. Please subscribe. And subscribe to ITMO open source chat. It's a really large community, and it has over 1,000 of participants, which is very good for a local community. We have some events when we meet, let's say, in vivo, in person. So feel free to join us if you are in St. Petersburg, and here's QR code for you. Otherwise, I'm ready to answer the questions, and thanks for your attention if you don't want to ask the questions.